Recently, there have been a lot of really good remakes of video games. Now, remakes are nothing new, but it seems recently they've been really hot. On this episode of Mediavania, what we're going to do is look at some of those remakes, why they're good, what makes them good, what we want in a remake, and possibly each of us are going to give a couple games that we would like to have remade in the future. As always, I've got the triad of the Mediavania with myself, Matt, and Nick. And coming in at the point of the triangle, and if you do it 3D, it would make like a pyramid, is David Waybright from Man vs. Meeple. So welcome back, y'all.
I'm Pyramid Head.
You're Pyramid Head.
Speaking of remakes.
Big Silent Hill.
Which will come up, I'm sure.
We'll talk about that. Well, thanks for coming, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. I love talking about non-board game things.
Isn't it great? Isn't it awesome?
All right. So I think we said we wanted to set some definitions up, right? There is a concept of remake and remaster, and there seems to be a definite difference between the two. So who wants to tackle a good definition? Because as we talk about these games, we're going to probably talk about some that are really technically remasters and not remakes.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take a swing at it. Remaster is, they're trying to recreate the same thing, just updated for modern times, right? Remake is they have to redo the engine. It's not just like modeling in textures and sound. They're making some significant changes to it. But I'd posit there's actually a third one, which is reboot. But sometimes it's a soft reboot, sometimes it's a hard reboot, and we can get into that too.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah. Rebooting something.
I was thinking about, as far as, for me, a good way to define remaster from a remake is with music. Lots of times bands will take like albums from decades ago and they'll remaster it. They'll get the original and they'll tweak it. They'll make it sound better, but they don't re-record everything. Mm-hmm. A remake would be if a band went in and re-recorded the album and tried to make it as close to the original as possible. But a remaster is just tweaking it and making it sound better. So to me, a remaster, and a prime example of that is Metroid Prime, where they took the original artwork, just kind of beefed it up a little bit, added some new controls, but it was called a remaster.
Metroid Prime, I think, is the most interesting one too, because where does that fall? Like remake or remaster? Because it does look really good. Because it is technically a remaster, correct? Are we all settled on? They called it a remaster, I think.
Yeah.
Officially. But that is a really great looking remaster. Most of the time when you get a remaster, you just generally get like HD textures, right? Like things look crisper, but sometimes not always for the better. I actually think a really bad example of a remaster recently, just off the top of my head right now, is Final Fantasy VIII. 8 got a remaster that it cleaned it up and it made it run fast and it, looked clean, but it doesn't really help those polygons look any better. It just kind of looks jagged and weird, and I just almost prefer them looking the traditional way that it did. But that was but I think Metroid Prime is a great example of a really good remaster, and one of the better games that came out this year.
So I have a question about Metroid Prime Remaster. I haven't played it. You said there were new controls, or they tweaked the controls?
Yeah, yes. They updated it.
What they did is they made it more of a twin stick type shooter, which is not the original way it was on the GameCube. So you use the two thumbsticks for typical first-person control, move and shoot. So they added that. If you want to go back to the old style, you can. So there's several different control methods. There's like the Wii with motion control, the old GameCube method, and then the new control, which seems to be the most popular, which is twin-stick control.
And they have all of those available?
Yes.
Well, that's cool. See, my question, of course, they labeled it a remaster, so we have to kind of go with that, but where is that line for you guys where it becomes a remake? I mean, I think mostly that falls within gameplay, right?
Right.
Controls. It probably starts with control tweaks, but then maybe extends into wholesale new elements to the game.
Well, wouldn't a perfect example of a remake, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, is Resident Evil 4.
Yep. Yeah. Currently, Resident Evil 4 is my favorite game of the year. Mm-hmm. And it is just a remake. And I know that there's lots of games that come out this year. It's got a lot ahead of it. I mean, it's got Zelda coming out this week. There's a lot ahead. But currently, nothing has been better that I played this year than Resident Evil 4. And
why is it a remake though? It's because they redid all the assets, right?
Well, they
did
also
voice
changed-
acting and everything.
They also changed gameplay too.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's but I mean, yeah, it's the same locations, it's the same story beats, it's but even some of the dialogue's been recorded. The game was remade from the ground up. It wasn't just a here's Resident Evil 4 that looks a little better. It's here's Resident Evil 4 in what it would look like if it came out in 2023 with like again, ground up, new graphics, new gameplay, new voice acting. It's just, but again, it does follow the same story. So if you've played Resident Evil 4, you know what to expect. You know who's gonna, how the end's gonna, go. But it plays and feels so great. To me, it's perfect because nostalgia-wise, it's how I remember Resident Evil 4. Even though it's completely different in my head, I'm like, man, Resident Evil 4 used to be one of the best games ever. And it still, to a lot of people, is. I just think that nostalgia is an interesting piece of this where you play something that you think was amazing and then you're like, oh, this actually wasn't that great, or it didn't control well at all. GoldenEye is a perfect example of that, where we all have fond memories of GoldenEye back in the day of playing that on N64. But if you played it just now, you'd be like, I can't play this for longer than 10 seconds. It's impossible because controls is terrible.
You talking about having to learn the controls, man. I remember pulling that up and it was like, I can't move. I don't know how to move into a room and shoot.
Exactly. But Resident Evil, modernized controls. It feels exactly how I would want a game like that to feel. But it still made me be like, oh yeah, I did love Resident Evil 4, right? Like, so it hits that nostalgia different, but while giving me a brand new experience.
Yeah. And Square did something really interesting. Can we talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake spoilers on this?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
the statute of limitations passed on that?
Spoiler if
right.
if you didn't play Final Fantasy. Wait, anyone on the call not play or want to play or
Right, 7 Remake.
7
remake? I have not played the remake.
Okay, is it alright if we spoil it? All right.
100%.
Square did something interesting, right? They pitched it as a remake of Final Fantasy VII, right? But this is kind of a legacy remake because the events of the original game still took place, and there's kind of a time loop, and now things are changing because of what had happened.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, it branches off and becomes its own timeline.
It's very interesting. It's really because the 7 remake made, again, people who were fans of 7 interested and question what's going to happen in the story, even though they've played this game before, right?
And it also retconned previous games. Like, they changed the ending to Crisis Core.
Yeah. It was all because they're casting the main villain, Sephiroth, as someone who is trying to go back and change the timeline of what happened in 7, right? Like, so 7 already happened, and now with 7 Remake, we get the same game, but Sephiroth is trying to change that timeline so that...
Because he lost.
Right? Which is really cool. It's super interesting. And yeah, they tease it out throughout the game, but you start to figure it out at some point where you're like, oh man, I don't know what's going to happen. Is this character going to make it? Like really cool stuff.
So earlier this year, another hot remake was Dead Space. Was that considered a remake or a remaster?
That was a remake.
Yeah, that was a remake. I own it. I have played very little of it. Nothing against the game. I just haven't gotten around to it. But that one felt, it's right in there where it completely respects and honors the original. It's probably less of a remake than what I've heard about Resident Evil 4 in terms of significant changes. But boy, does it look pretty. And they did tweak a lot of control stuff to modernize it. I think that's the big key for me is like things like the knife in Resident Evil 4 and being able to use it the way you do now. And then in Dead Space, I hadn't gotten this far at all, but I believe in the original Dead Space, the sort of like spacewalking was just like from point A to point B, from like floor to floor or floor to ceiling. And in this one, it's more like Dead Space 2, I think, where you're actually like floating around and, kind of controlling.
Yeah, they added that, right? Like the zero gravity kind of traversal. That wasn't in the first one, I think, or mainly was from 2, or if it was in 1, and not that much, but yeah, I know what you're saying. They added that. I believe. I haven't played that yet, though. I again, that's just on the list of a million games in my backlog, but
yeah.
And then, actually, I'm waiting on a pre-order to come in, even though it's already been released, is the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster.
Yes, I have that. I have started that. I'm 4 hours into Final Fantasy 1.
But that's more of a remaster, right? So
Right.
don't they?
That's just like updated sprites and music.
That's updated sprites, but everything else, the music and everything's no. Did they update the
No,
music?
so they
It's updated music, but it's the
But-
same. They didn't do like anything crazy with it. though.
But you can in the options choose. Like you can have the updated arrangements, or you can just, if you want it completely classic, you can. You can even do it with the font style. They've updated the font to be like just a sharper font, not so pixelated. But you can turn that back to the standard font, so it can look as much like the original as possible. But and they do have some quality of life stuff built into those games where you can turn off encounters, you can actually even boost XP, you can do all different kinds of stuff to just like run through them. I've actually found that the no encounters is incredibly helpful now in 2023 because listen, half of that game you're just trying to figure out where to go next, and getting hit by 50 million random encounters on the way, it's just frustrating anymore, right? Like I you need to do it to level up, but doing it on my own terms is different than me trying to be like, I need to know where the next spot to go is. So I click off random encounters, I go where I need to go, turn them back on when I get to like a dungeon or whatever, fight that level enemy in that zone, and then go fight the boss and carry on.
You don't like that continual tension of waiting for that battle music to start just at any moment?
I do, you know, and it's funny. I used to love it. I mean, as you know, back in the day, that I did. I didn't mind it. You know,
Yeah.
But Final Fantasy 1 and 2 are like super short games comparative, you know, to games now where they don't have that. So because that's part of how long the game takes is like just random battles.
It's funny you say that. I've thought about before going back and if they ever re-released it, replaying the original Pokemon Red, and then I realized I would never want to go through those caves again and hit a Zubat every 2 steps. That drove me absolutely insane. So I appreciate they turn off the random encounters.
Well, and they've changed it now where you see enemies, right? Like, and I think Pokemon does this now, and I know Final Fantasy does this. They've leaned more action, but you see the enemies on the screen. So it's like, if you want to fight them, you run up to them and engage, or you run around them, right? They've just, random battles are just kind of an older game mechanic that hasn't really stuck in any new modern. I even think the Persona games have changed to being able to see enemies and then choose to fight them if you wish.
Well, that kind of leads into the next thing. So what is the appeal of remakes? Obviously, one of them is some quality of life stuff. It's like, all right, people were kind of annoyed with random encounters, so we'll do this. What's some other appeals of remakes? I know nostalgia's one. There's a lot of people that are playing these games and never played them before either.
Yep, I think David should tackle this one because he nailed it in the chat.
Oh yeah, I did mention this. I think it's an interesting thing when you talk about remakes. We were talking about it, movies versus video games, and I think with video games, they're so generational, and I mean that both to humankind and hardware platforms, that some kids just haven't played these games. So there is that market. But I think, Marty, like you said a second ago, the nostalgia is why we want to play those games. And I think to tie it back to what you were talking about in terms of remaster versus remake, that all depends on when they want to do it and what platforms exist at the moment. You know, because it could be a remaster if it was just on the last generation of hardware. But if it's a couple generations ago, it might have to lean more towards a full-on remake, or worse yet, 3 generations ago. And it got me thinking, too, it's kind of interesting. Some games that have kind of ridden the remaster remake train, like most recently that I can think of, Last of Us, they had a remaster, and then now they had the Last of Us Part 1, which was effectively the remake. And how hard is it to delineate between those 3 different products? Because the steps graphically between the remaster and the remake aren't humongous, but they did do some of the quality of life and gameplay differences with, I think, the remake versus the remaster. And then you've got games also like Grand Theft Auto, which have become like a service game that everyone just, if you want to keep playing it, you might as well just migrate to the newest version. I mean, Grand Theft Auto 5 has been on how many generations of hardware now? 3?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I'm not sure.
Like that in Skyrim.
Yes, Skyrim keeps coming out with new versions as well.
Exactly. It's like those games are like full release games, unlike Fortnite, but they're kind of treated almost like Fortnite in that it will just always be around.
Yeah.
Now that's it's interesting. We talk about all these really successful remakes. I guess that's just one that just hit me that didn't really go over that well. Grand Theft was Auto 3. The remake tanked majorly. The one that came out last year, and maybe it wasn't 3, but there was a remake that didn't do good at all.
I might have been even San Andreas. I feel like the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas remake might have
Maybe
been
it was.
just hampered with like bugs and like it just didn't feel done. They may have went back and fixed it, but I recall one of the Grand Theft Autos around that time. It was either like San Andreas or Vice City or something that was hampered with bugs. But
Plus the expectations of that, like if you're a fan of those games, if they're remaking it, I want it to be Grand Theft Auto 3 or San Andreas, but I want it to be exactly as good as the newest version of Grand Theft Auto. And I think that also speaks to like, the ones you guys were talking about earlier, like the Final Fantasies, the nostalgia for the way those looked and the way those sound. It's why those options exist in the, you can turn all that stuff back on. But for PS1 and like Xbox One generation or even 360, you don't have fond memories today. You can't look at the graphics of early Polygon stuff and go, oh, that's so nice. It just looks bad.
Yeah, this is the worst texture.
Yeah.
So those games kind of have to be remade as opposed to like just remastered.
Yeah, and I think coming back to Marty's question just a little bit as far as like, I don't was it like why it's important to
or what's the appeal to you for remakes? Maybe aside from a nostalgia.
Video game preservation is like super important, right? I think, and we all grew up at a time where we were able to grow up through video games being born, period, right? Like from Pong to, where we're at today with Star Wars Jedi Survivor. We've seen all of these games, and people that we grew up playing those games, and now the people that are making Jedi Survivor also grew up at that time and have those same fond memories as we do of games like the original Tomb Raider or the original Super Mario Brothers or whatever, right? And want to say, I want this experience just in 2023, and I want other people to experience that as well, like I did, right? And it'll be my kids or our kids or just who will see those games for the first time ever, like Sonic coming out with brand new remakes and versions, and so Andy and my son's Andy, he can play Sonic for the first time, or play Mario for the first time. So video preservation is just really important. So I think I have absolutely zero problem with remakes and remasters because it's just keeping those old memories and nostalgia alive in the current generation, and keeping those titles relevant. I think, again, if we didn't do this, if we didn't, well, I'm not making these. If they did not remake these, then they would be forgotten. I think people would play new. Then it would just be Grand Theft Auto and all these other games. They won't know what we started with and how great they were.
Yeah, well,
Nick, we haven't heard from you a lot tonight.
Well, I was going to say, Tomb Raider's done a couple of different things. They have remastered some of their older games, but they also rebooted too, right? There are 2 new games. It's like, kind of a different Lara Croft, right? So you can kind of hit a new generation of gamers, as Dave was talking about, that way. The ones who, we talk about movies slightly. It's easy to load up a Netflix, Hulu, whatever, and watch an old movie, but you can't find a PS Vita easily and play a game on there. So that's why, those reboots and remakes are helping that next generation of gamers experience the same things that we did.
Y'all actually hit, Matt, you hit the nail on the head. I was going to say game preservation is what's important to me. I remember several years ago, I was a big Blizzard fan, and I loved StarCraft, Diablo 2, Warcraft 3. Well, those you couldn't play anymore on the PC. I'm coming to it. So when StarCraft Remastered came out, I was just, I loved it because I could play the old way, the new way. It's like, this I remember. Diablo 2 came later, and it's like, oh, yes, I love playing this. Now, one that didn't work was Warcraft 3 because they got the little grubby hands in there, for some reason, changed a lot of stuff that didn't need to be changed, and they shut down the ability to play the other game. So that was not preserved. It was changed, and I can't play it the way it used to be, which stinks. Now, they hit the other two really well with StarCraft and Diablo 2, but they dropped the ball on Warcraft 3. But for me, it was all about preservation. I want to go back and play StarCraft and hear those original songs again, and I have that option now.
Yeah, I agree. I played Warcraft 3. I feel like I didn't hate that, but I did.
The remaster?
But I
Reforged.
I'm gonna get beat up in the corner over here.
No, it's fine.
No, I thought it was fine. I just I had fun. I mean, Warcraft 3, I remember back in the day, made me buy a new computer. I remember when Warcraft 3, like the original, came out, they made me buy a new PC to be able to play that.
Nostalgia's big. I just mentioned Blizzard. So remember when World of Warcraft Classic came out?
Yeah, I know.
There was a huge boost in subscriptions, and I was one of them for nostalgia. And then I realized how much of a grind Classic was, and 1 month later I canceled.
Yeah,
but for 1 month, I got to experience it again.
Yeah, 42-year-old Matt does not have the same time that 22-year-old Matt had. That's for sure. And that's a big, that was with Warcraft Classic. Is just I knew how much time I had spent in that, and I didn't even try to download it. I was like, it's cool they're doing it, but can't do it.
And there's obviously a market for these because, as we mentioned, a big 3 remakes just this year have done really well. Dead Space, really well reviewed, sold well. Metroid Prime remaster, they just announced they sold over 1 million units for a Metroid game. That's pretty darn good. It was well reviewed. And then Resident Evil 4, which, Matt, like you said, a lot of people, it's their game of the year so far. So yet another remake that has done really well. So here's the question to everybody.
You can suplex old ladies. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, and also Advance Wars. Like, we all love that.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good point, which I'm currently playing right now. And because I don't have a DS or GBA. I don't have a GBA anymore to be able to play it. So
and that's a remake.
It is a total remake. I don't like some of the things they did, but it's at least I get to replay it.
Yeah, and I think that other than nostalgia, to get back to your question, Marty, the other thing that I think this allows for is a lot of games that were maybe slightly underappreciated in their time or on their platform. It gives them another opportunity to sort of like breathe, on current platforms that people,
I also...
Like you were saying, Vita earlier, Nick. I mean, there's a lot of PSP games and Vita games that no one will ever even hear of. Yeah. It was funny. My son found our old PSP in one of his desk drawers the other day with like Patapon is the only game we have for it.
Patapon.
Exactly.
I love Patapon. I love my PSP. My PSP got so much. And then the Vita, I swapped it out for the Vita when the Vita came out. I actually want a Vita just because I want to store a bunch of stuff on there. Because the PS1 shop, there's just stuff on there that you can get and load it up, but they're kind of expensive now.
I still think UMDs are coming back. They're gonna rule the day.
They're gonna. I have one UMD still. I have the Crisis Core UMD because the Final Fantasy Crisis Core is the only way that you could play it until they just did the remaster. Or that might have been a remake too. Actually, to be honest with you, it's that might have been a very well done remaster, but I'm not entirely. I can't remember how updated Crisis Core was.
We talked about systems that you maybe wish you wouldn't want to play again. So let's move into the section of where each of us maybe have a couple games that we would love to see remade or remastered. And we'll just kind of go around the horn with each given one to start off with. So Matt, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, we'll go around Robin. Maybe we'll each pick one and we'll go around and pick a couple. But I do want to say I don't think we've actually really seen the lift of remakes just yet. I think they're getting very good now. We've had some really good ones, but I'm thinking with these really good ones, like by next year and the year after, there's going to be waves. And because some of the really great classics haven't been done yet or touched in to be remade. My number one pick of what game I want a 2024 release for, or 25. I don't know how long it takes you guys to do these things. I want Metal Gear Solid. It's been remade before.
Yeah.
It was Twin Snakes came out for was it GameCube or
I think it was GameCube.
Yeah, Twin Snakes, there's Metal Gear Solid, then there was Twin Snakes, so they did redo it, but I want another one. I want it all remade. I want David Hayter back. Sorry, Kiefer. Just we need the classic people back. And that was one of my favorite games on the PlayStation, and I would love to see that remade. It is still playable now. It's a little difficult. just with the control schemes, and obviously it's a little dated, but
Well, you've seen the rumor, right, that supposedly Sony has made a deal with Konami to re-release some of their products, such as Silent Hill, which we already know about, Metal Gear Solid, and possibly Castlevania.
Castlevania was, that was the one I saw too.
And the
Really?
first one that there's supposed to be a PlayStation event at the end of the month, and people are wondering if something's going to be mentioned then. But what's been swirling is a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of wish they just do all of 1, 2, and 3. I think they all deserve
They're
and
only going to do 1 though. 3 is probably the best one.
But I get that, but I
hear you.
I would still pick Solid. I think I get it. I mean, the last hour of Metal Gear Solid 3 is maybe one of my favorite hours in video games ever. At the end, the accumulation of Snake Eater is so good. It's crazy. But the first was Metal Gear Solid is just with Psycho Mantis and Falcon Raven and all those guys, like the snow base sneaking around. Give it to me.
How'd you beat Psycho Mantis on PC though?
All right, we'll swap it over to Marty. Marty, what's your first one?
All right, so of my two, one is one I think that would do well, and one's just a personal thing for me. So the one I think that might do well, I never had a PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2, so there's a lot of games I never got to experience because I was PC and Nintendo at the time. I would love to see, because I never got to play it, a remake of Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Wait, you never played Symphony of the Night?
Okay,
Marty, what?
So here's the.
I know.
I gotta step in.
What?
Listen, a remake of it would be neat. I, however, will firmly stand and die on this hill that game does not need to be ever remade. I think,
and you can play it on current consoles, right? Like they have versions of it on the PS Store and whatever. Yeah,
it plays as good as it does and looks as good as it did. Like
Really?
that game is infinitely replayable. And
Okay.
So
it even
I would
has
think,
an infinite castle.
well, there is an infinite castle that you can flip up and down. But what I'm saying is just I really think regardless of the system you get it on, like there's millions of places to play Symphony of the Night right now. You'll still enjoy it. Like it's still like, holy crap. Symphony of the Night's one of my favorite 2D side-scroller games ever, and I really think you should play it just now. Again, I would play the remake in a heartbeat.
I was gonna say, Matt,
I would.
I hear what you're saying, but
Yeah.
when I think of Symphony of the Night and I think of graphics that look like Ori and the Blind Forest mashed up with that, I would be in love with that game.
Sure, I get you, but I also love like Dead Cells. Like I love the pixel art, and and I have the Dead Cells Castlevania DLC add-on, and it's really cool. Like it's great. And sure, I would of course play Symphony of the Night Remastered in a heartbeat. I just like if I'm gonna put something above it, like ahead of it, I'm just thinking like I could still play Symphony of the Night today.
Got it. All right, David.
All right, I have some weird ones. I have one that is actually kind of been not remade, but it's been rebooted at least. So I'm going to start with that one. But this is a game that I have a lot of nostalgia for. It's an old SNES game. It's called ActRaiser.
Oh yeah, ActRaiser.
Oh, wait a minute, that's been redone.
Yeah, they
Right?
did do a remaster.
Yeah, ActRaiser Renaissance, I believe, by Square Enix, in fact.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked at it. Is it a remaster, redo? Is it a completely different game?
Okay, so I played this pretty extensively because I loved that game back in the days also. So great choice. The side-scrolling levels are the same, but they considerably redid the tactical levels in some ways for the worse, because you kind of lose the freeform simulation part of the city management levels, and they have like waves. It's almost like a tower defense game in some ways. So I would classify that as a remake because they changed the gameplay significantly.
It is hard to do like a lot of that that portion of the game back in the day. It was given a lot of like leeway because there weren't a ton of games that did those sorts of things back then, especially on console. So it didn't have to be great, but that sort of like city building, civilization building aspect mashed up with a side-scrolling game. I just remember feeling that was so amazing. I loved it. And so would you say Renaissance is worth trying or no?
If you loved the original, yes.
Okay.
Nick, what's your first one?
All right, this was not going to surprise anybody, but Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yep. I could have said it for you.
Yeah, you could have guessed. But I think we're getting it because we got Tactics Ogre, and it was on the list. There was like that NVIDIA leak, the GeForce Now leak, and Final Fantasy Tactics was on there. So I'm hoping we hear about it soon.
Yeah, man.
Final Fantasy. And it seems to be Square Enix has done really well with their tactical based games. Everyone they released have done really well.
Mm-hmm. All right. I have a very random specific one, and this one might be surprising to some because they continue to make games in this series, but I want a very specific game remade in a very specific style. I want to see Street Fighter Alpha 3 remade. I know it's wild. Like, it's just like Street Fighter Alpha 3 is very good in its time, but the Alpha series hasn't been brought back. They've been sticking to the mainline series, which I love. Street Fighter is one of my favorite games, period. I want Street Fighter Alpha 3 with the Guilty Gear team doing it. Mm. Like, I want them to just hand it over and give it to them and get like this super high res, like nice 2D animated Street Fighter. That's like with all of the 3D effects that they kind of add to it and everything. Street Fighter Alpha 3 made by Arc Systems.
Third Strike would be really awesome in that style too.
Same thing. Yeah, Third Strike would be great too, whether it be Third Strike or Alpha 3. I just, I think the Alpha series has been kind of left in the dust. But yeah, that's what I would like.
So my second one is for me personally, because I have such great memories of it, and there is no other way to play it except on the GameCube. I would love a total remake of Eternal Darkness.
Sure.
I have to tweak some stuff because
that almost happened, right? There was like a failed Kickstarter or something.
Yeah, the guys they wanted to remake it or something, but it hasn't happened. It would have to be tweaked somewhat. For those who haven't played Eternal Darkness, it's very Lovecraftian. It has to do with elder gods and all this. You're traveling through time. It does this crazy stuff. There's a sanity meter. The more insane you become, things start happening on the console. Like it would tell you the controller's unplugged, or they would flip the controller directions the other way. It would blue screen. You'd have to tweak some of that stuff. But it was a great experience. I thought the story was amazing. And there hasn't been a lot of good, really Lovecraftian theme games. And that was just a really solid one for me. So personally for me, I'd want Eternal Darkness.
So what modern 2023 gimmicks would that game have to make you like go crazy?
Oh,
like
it's going to be calling your phone.
Oh my gosh, that would be so trippy if you got a text message.
If you were willing to hand over a little bit of personal information, things could get crazy.
This is true. It just
I always love that. I'm glad you brought that up, Marty. I was trying to think of the name of that game the other day because my son, I forget what he was playing that was like breaking the fourth wall, and I'd mentioned my experience with Batman Arkham Asylum, doing that at a certain point, but I couldn't remember the name of that GameCube game.
And actually, I could play it. I do have a copy. I do have a GameCube, but I just haven't done it. So, but I could do it if I wanted to. David.
All right, my second one is a weird game. This would not likely be successful, but it's this strange little PC game from Maxis back in the day, and it was called Robo Sport. Did anyone ever remember Robo Sport?
Yes.
Robo Sport is awesome. It is a programming game where you have like 5 robots, and you could play multiplayer too. Like I'd have to get up away from my computer, and someone else would sit down and like program their robots. But there's just this little arena. You would program each robot, and it was effectively time-based. You had so much time for each robot. You'd tell them all what they wanted to do, and then you'd hit go, and then all the robots would execute their programs, kind of like Robo Rally.
Robo Rally, yeah.
This is like a really difficult game to search for because I'm just getting actual like robots playing soccer. I know that's not it, but
this is better than Robo Rally because it was like a capture the flag game where you were like trying to get the other one's flag, but you could like set your robots to just kind of sit in place and like perform sentry duty over like a certain like cone of influence.
Yeah, it had like an
I
Overwatch.
love that game, and I think it was. I don't know if I'd say it was ahead of its time, but I do think the gameplay would play better today with the tactical crowd than anyone that existed back then. And it was really obscure, but man, RoboSport was great.
How about Nick's
All right.
next one?
My next one is Sacrifice. It's a very old action RTS
Yeah, that's like a
by
Diablo like,
Shiny.
right?
No. It's resource management. It's an RTS, but it's
Oh.
first person. So you're like a really powerful mage, and you're gathering your resources. Like you're not sending out drones and stuff. Like you're first person in it, doing it. And like I've never seen a game like it before or since.
Huh.
Sacrifice by Shiny, and Earthworm Jim is kind of like a cameo in it. Like James is one of the gods.
Sacrifice. I
Yeah,
remember this from Shine. Is this the one
yeah.
that is it kind of like Angel or
One of the characters is kind of like heavenly, but yeah, you work for the different gods, and you get and it's actually kind of like a deck builder or action builder, like sort of like Guild Wars too. Like depending on which, yes, that's the one. Depending on which god you work for which mission, you get a different ability. So you can stick with one god obviously and get like themed set of minions and abilities. But the best one was like customizing the ultimate build by picking and choosing which god you wanted to work for. So you had a really broken hero. So that's why my friends would never play multiplayer with me, because I like would spend like hours optimizing the perfect build.
Real quick runner up. I want to see Wave Race 64 remade.
Oh,
they haven't
nice.
done a good jet ski game in forever.
But you can play the original now, right?
You can, but I want a new one, and I like the original one. Still fun. Actually, that's the reason I got that Switch way too expensive pass for it, and I played it once. But
I have to say, games like that, whenever those games originally came out, like Wave Runner games or boating games, my memory of the first ones to do it is so much better than what the second one was or the third one, because they tried to improve the physics and do this, and maybe technically they were right, but none of those types of games ever played better. Like even some of the old driving games, like the old BMX games, or not BMX, but old sort of like
BMX Triple X, right?
Those sorts of games. I had one that was like quad runner type racing, like on a dirt track with hills.
ATV off road.
Yeah, ATV off road.
Yeah.
It felt so good, but then like later, I've played newer ones. They're
not as good.
They just don't feel that way.
No, the ATV off-road had an amazing feel. I know exactly what you're talking about. And for those that missed the BMX Triple X joke, I don't know. They tried to go M-rated on a BMX.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember seeing ads for that.
And it had like nudity in it and stuff. It was absolutely ridiculous why they would do that. But the BMX games, I don't remember BMX game like before that. Dave Mira had a few BMX games, but aside from that, you're absolutely right. ATV off-road had a certain feel to it, and the newer ones just did not.
It's weird. Like even Excite Bike had better feeling jumps on hills
than like modern dirt bike games. Well, wrestling games were kind of the same way. When wrestling is specifically on like the N64 with like the wrestling games on the N64, WrestleMania 2000 or whatever, there was like just some really good physics in there. And then when they started to get better graphics and whatnot, they were just never as fun. Like I just liked the original ones. Like that made me.
I don't know what it is about those games. I feel the same way about boxing games too. There was a fight night game somewhere in there that felt really good, but then they just didn't feel quite as good.
It's hard to.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. The one where you could do like create your character, right?
SSX Tricky is another one. SSX was very good. Snowboarding really good in SSX, but not all snowboarding games felt that good.
Yeah,
wow. This is a whole other topic.
I was gonna say that's nostalgic, because I remember going to Toys R Us and playing Wave Rider 64 for the first time, and I thought, this is the most realistic water I've ever seen in my entire life, and just being blown away by it.
That's what I thought about Wave Race 64. I thought just the water physics in that game were still like really impressive. Just how your jet ski reacts to the water for an N64 game, it was like super impressive, and I would love to see that now. I don't think anyone's nailed the water like them. Well, maybe Sea of Thieves, but you're not like jet skiing around your ship.
Yeah, I mean, it was overdone. It was exaggerated, right? Like actually, as we're talking about it, I can literally remember the buoyancy that you felt just sitting there in the water. It was like super bouncy, probably more than realistic. And then I think a lot of those game companies, they try to just become more realistic, and they forget about the fun part, and it becomes less fun.
Well, that's why I always liked the NFL Blitz more than I did Madden, because it was just over the top, fun. I didn't need to know all the different plays and everything like that. So, Matt, you brought up something just kind of start wrapping this thing up. remakes have been super popular. So you feel that, or y'all feel that this is probably opening a door for a lot of companies going back into their library going, holy crap, look how well these other games did.
Yeah.
There's some money to be made.
Well, even that, I just think that, again, we have thousands of older titles that, you know, and especially with, you know, maybe creative direction being stalled in certain you know, maybe if a studio's having trouble finding a new title or something brand new, can they reach back in the archive and rehash something that people do want, right? Like, there's so many titles that I could literally probably just like rattle off, you know, 20 random ones that would be very successful now. Legacy of Kain, whereas Legacy of Kain, there's probably like some new brand new Legacy.
There are some weird rights issues about Legacy of Kain. That's what I think held. Yeah, I think it was held it back because people. I mean, I would hundreds of play Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver games all day.
Yeah, but you just go back into that and start remaking stuff, and yeah, I think with how well, especially Capcom's been treating Resident Evil remakes, and how well Metroid Prime was received, and how, you know, again, and we've seen good remakes, but not like Game of the Year category style remakes, and that's what's going to change it. Like, that's where we might see, like, you know, we haven't really seen much from Nintendo, so like, because they like making new games, like, which is cool, like Mario Odyssey and, you know, the new Breath of the Wild or whatever. But
you could argue Zelda's a soft reboot every time.
Yeah, but like, what if they what if we got a brand new Super Mario World that was just a remake of Mario World, right? Like, wild.
Yeah, that would be cool. I honestly love to see the Galaxy games, you know, tweaked up a little bit too.
Yeah. Again, we could talk about this forever, but yes, I think that we have just seen the beginning of incredible remakes, and it's not a bad thing. I just think we're gonna start to see all these really great old titles get new life.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say you know, as Matt mentioned, you know, we talk about Resident Evil a lot, but a lot of companies are looking at their core line of titles, and they're just starting to dig into those libraries now, right? Like, they just did the Demon Souls remake, so I assume we'll see other Dark Souls games get remade, and hopefully, you know, fingers crossed for Bloodborne, which would also be on my list.
Yeah, which those games aren't even that old. Last of Us, not that old. You know, Dark Souls, like, Dark Souls was pretty old, but like, still, when I'm thinking
remake, we've seen some remakes, but yeah, remake.
I'm going back to like Super Nintendo and whatnot, you know. But like, the PlayStation, the PS1 is like prime for remakes, just because like those graphics were not good, right? Like, you know, we look back on it, like, those are the games that really could use a good remake. Everything before that, same, but you know,
well, that's where your Silent Hills and Metal Gear Solids could do really well.
Yeah, Siphon Filter.
Psyops. Does anyone remember Psyops?
Yeah. That was the first game that used like mind power. You could pick people up and throw them across the room.
It was one of the first Havoc engine games, and it had such great ragdoll physics of picking people up and throwing them around.
But see, we just have Jedi Survivor now, so it's like, you know, Psyops would be cool, but we didn't have like a really cool Jedi game back then where you could do that.
Well, when remakes or re-releases are good, I mean, they're popular. All of us are in the board game space of content creation or publishing. There's we've seen it past several years where a game that hasn't been out for 10, 15 years and you can't get your hands on it, publisher picks it up, throws a little bit of paint on it, maybe tweaks a rule or something, and it sells like crazy because either one, people love the nostalgia, or those old games are still really solid and fun. And like you said, Matt, maybe we don't need the newest ideas on video games and stuff like that. Take stuff that's worked in the past and just let us do it again. Just like taking an old board game, like the one that came to mind is like, you know, Libertalia was reskinned and everything like that. They cleaned it up a little bit like that. Sold really well, pretty much the same game, but you just couldn't get the other version. And I think that's what's happening in the video game space too.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, y'all. What was there any other beside those remakes that you mentioned? That's like, we got to have this one too. Or
you know,
I mean, I'm sure,
this isn't. I don't know that this qualifies as a you gotta have this one, but it is a very recent announcement, at least in relatively speaking. And they're I don't know if this is a reboot. It's definitely not a remaster, but it's Lords of the Fallen. Did anyone play Lords of the Fallen?
They have a new one of those coming out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a new one coming out, but it is
called Lords of the Fallen.
It's called Lords of the Fallen, and it's not exactly a remake.
Yeah,
it sounds
like
quite
trying
different.
again. Yeah, they're like trying
Yeah.
again. That almost feels like a second.
That's a reboot. That's a reboot. Yeah.
It's called a second.
Yeah, the first game wasn't bad. It wasn't
Right.
great, and it was a far cry from any of the
Yeah.
Souls games that it tried.
Far
to
Cry.
be. But
give me a new Two Human. Remember Two Human?
I remember the name. I
Oh,
don't remember the game.
Infamous. I would love to see some more
Yeah, that'd be
superhero.
cool. Yeah,
like-
those were great games. Infamous was really cool.
Yeah.
Infamous Brute Force.
Yeah, we could probably just go down a list.
Yeah, yeah.
I could literally
so-
sit here
Yeah,
for
I could do
hours and list
Toe
games.
Jam and Earl.
I don't know. I guess you know what? In the
They
comments,
did
Toe
a new
Jam and
one.
Earl was good.
They did a new Toe
They
Jam
did.
and Earl, right?
Yeah, I
Toe Jam and
know.
Earl, we already got. Unless you want like, you don't want realistic Toe Jam and Earl. That looks
No.
really weird.
I want photorealism.
Then you would just have what was it, Heidi Klum that dressed as a worm for Halloween. Did you see that? Like that's what the character model would look like.
It is really
No one
funny
catches
that,
that reference. Then just look
lots
it
of
up online.
times the remakes maintain the original look, especially pixel art.
Mhm.
But then if it was the more polygon 3D stuff, that's what gets the new, the new coat of paint, because that just doesn't translate well. But pixel art still does, which I think is really cool. I love seeing all these indie games and stuff coming out with pixel art style games that are still super popular. Just means the kids don't necessarily need the best graphics. Just make it fun.
I hear you.
Yeah, and I think that works for all kids, not just us old guys. I mean, plenty of younger people are now embracing those pixely games, obviously. Or
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Just older games. Andy loves playing older. One of his favorite games to play right now is Halo, just the Master Chief Collection, right? And you can play. And I know it's not a pixel game, but the graphics are not great. But you can switch between the old graphics and like the up-resed graphics, and hit the button and to go back. He loves just going back and forth between them and like going like that. This is how olden games look like, and I'm like, I'm gonna murder you. Olden. I'm like, especially you watch your mouth. I'm not gonna murder myself.
How did you have a
Get
controller with
crank
just two
electricity.
buttons? How did
Yeah,
that
Play
work?
long enough.
Exactly.
All right, y'all. Well, we ran a little bit longer than what we anticipated, but once we get
Tight
into
20,
it,
Marty. It's a tight
it's
20.
a lot. I know. Let's say we shoot for 20. It's like, and here we are, 40 something minutes in. So,
We hope you're
let
still
us
here.
know your thoughts. Are you liking the remakes, or if there's some remakes you would like to have made, put it down in the comments, and we'll see them and we'll talk about it. And guys, it was a great topic, and I love sitting around and chatting with you. And I've been Marty, or I am Marty, I guess is the way you really should say
Marty.
it.
I've been Matt.
Nick.
I've never been Marty. I've been David.
He's always been David.
David, once again, thanks for having you on, man. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having you on.
It's
Thanks for
always
coming
fun.
on. It's been a lot of fun. And we'll see you guys next time on Mediavania.